Hello and welcome to Asia News Today. Please subscribe to the channel, click that like button if you enjoy the program. A lot to cover today. In today's news, a significant escalation in the Russia-Ukraine story, tourists flocking to the Philippines. The Burmese military faced down a UN committee over alleged genocide 5 years ago, and a significant ramping up of semiconductor production in China. All that and more coming up in today's Asia News Today. We start with urgent international news, not about Asia specifically, but will certainly reverberate around the world today. Russian President Vladimir Putin has formally recognised two breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine as independent. He's used this diplomatic wordplay as a reason to order the Russian army to launch a so-called peacekeeping mission into the area. His actions are a significant ramping up of the diplomatic tensions in the ongoing Russian-Ukraine crisis. The president has ordered his defence officials to deploy troops into the two regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Columns of military vehicles, including tanks, have now entered the city of Donetsk, the capital of one of the two breakaway regions of eastern Ukraine. At this stage, it's not immediately clear whether the Russian military advance is a Trojan horse for an actual invasion of Ukraine that the US and its allies have warned about for weeks. Speaking yesterday on TV, an aggravated Russian president described Ukraine as an integral part of Russia's history and said eastern Ukraine was ancient Russian lands and that he was confident the Russian people would support his decision to enter the eastern region of Ukraine. The UK have already announced an immediate application of sanctions, and US officials say they're having private conversations with the Ukrainian president about relocating outside of Kiev. All this as the UN calls for an Emergency Security Council meeting over the matter. And we'll keep you up to date with all the latest information on this story at thetiger.com. Nearly 22,000 tourists have headed to the Philippines since it reopened its borders on February the 10th. Now, mayors from around the country are meeting in Manila to consider downshifting to a new normal status that involves a further relaxation of restrictions, some of which have been enforced for nearly 2 years. Most of the tourists have come from the US, Canada, the UK and South Korea, as well as Australia, Vietnam and Japan. Since February the 10th, the government has been allowing fully vaccinated tourists to enter the Philippines without quarantine, but they have to produce a negative COVID-19 PCR test before their arrival. New infections have plunged in the Philippines in the past few weeks, from a high of more than 40,000 in January to below 2,000. Close to 70% of some 110 million Filipinos are already fully vaccinated. We'll have a short break on Asia News Today, then back with more.
Join the conversation and have your voice heard. Discuss the issues, share information and get information. Thaiger Talk is where you keep in touch with everything Thailand. Go to thetiger.com/talk.
And welcome back to Asia News Today. The Burmese military junta says that a case alleging genocide against the country's Rohingya minority has no grounds to proceed. Addressing the International Court of Justice in person at The Hague, the junta's Minister of International Cooperation made the statement, "The governor of Myanmar remains committed to addressing the problems in northern Rakhine State, which have a long history." He also said, "They are determined to solve these complex problems through peaceful means of negotiation and reconciliation." Yesterday's hearing was further complicated over who should be the rightful party representing Myanmar after last year's coup, when the elected government that had overseen the alleged genocide was ousted by a military coup on February the 1st. The Burmese junta is still facing guerrilla forces and ethnic armed groups opposing its power seizure. A parallel national unity government, composed mostly of lawmakers ousted by the coup, is still lobbying internationally for formal recognition. Both sides are seeking to represent Myanmar in this case, which centres on the military's brutal crackdown in Rakhine State 5 years ago that triggered an exodus of more than 700,000 Muslim Rohingya. Numerous survivors who fled to neighbouring Bangladesh later recounted tales of systematic rape, massacre and destruction of Rohingya villages. In 2019, Myanmar's then civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi personally defended her country at the court, arguing that there was no genocidal intent in the treatment of the Rohingya. At the same time, she avoided using the term Rohingya, which infuriated an ethnic community that's long been treated as outsiders in Myanmar. The Vietnamese President will make a state visit to Singapore this week at the invitation of Singapore's President. The trip from February the 24th to the 26th is the first state visit Singapore will receive since the start of the COVID pandemic in early 2020. Mr Phuc will meet with President Halimah, Singapore's PM, the Senior Minister Goh Jok Tong and the Speaker of Parliament. Mr Phuc will be accompanied by his spouse, as well as several ministers, senior officials and a business delegation. During the visit, Mr Phuc and Mr Lee will jointly witness the signing of bilateral agreements that will further strengthen the multifaceted cooperation between Singapore and Vietnam. Stocks have dropped sharply across the Asia-Pacific region in reaction to the escalating conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as jittery investors react to the crisis. Taiwan's stock market dived, and Tokyo's Nikkei stock average fell over 2% at one point in yesterday's trading. South Korea's KOSPI index fell 1.4%. Stocks affected include tech, auto and retail as investors look for a safe space to weather the storm, turning to currency and gold, with the yen strengthening slightly against the US dollar and yen-dominated gold futures rising to new heights. Russian stocks, the ruble and European shares tumbled, while oil prices continued to rise as investors grew increasingly nervous. 2,810 companies, including big names, are driving the semiconductor sector's fast growth in China. Chinese car makers, cloud computing companies and smartphone vendors are branching out into chip design as semiconductors and processors developed in-house become key to differentiating their products and services from their rivals. The trend follows a prolonged global chip supply crunch and highlights the importance of chips to both economic recovery from sporadic outbreaks of COVID-19 in the post-COVID world and future economic growth. The Chinese acceleration of locally manufactured semiconductors is leveraging opportunities brought by developments in artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things and self-driving vehicles, which is propelling research in the semiconductor sector. Tensions over Taiwan and the ongoing US-China trade war has also forced some of China's larger tech companies and manufacturers to seek local solutions as the world's supply chain is radically overhauled. So that's all the main stories from around Asia today. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest in the Russia-Ukraine story at thethaiger.com. Please subscribe to the channel if you get a chance, and maybe even click that like button below. But from all of us here at Asia News Today, we'll be back with another edition tomorrow.